Good afternoon. It's 4:03 p.m. on the 23rd of May, 2024, and the meeting of the Library Board of Trustees is now open. If you would like to participate, information on participating in today's meeting and providing public comment, including remotely by Zoom or telephone, is on this meeting's agenda, which is online at isearchmonterey.org. We ask attendees to keep phones and devices muted. Thank you for participating in your city government. Next is the roll call.
Library Trustee Falguth,
Present.
Library Trustee Moreau,
Here.
Library Trustee Petty,
Here.
Vice Chair Silvera,
Here.
and Chair Joshi.
Here. Next, we have consent agenda, which consists of 5 items: approval of minutes, and then information reports. There are 3 of them, and other consent items, which is requesting appropriation of funds. If there are any questions or comments, go ahead, Marsha.
I just had a couple points of clarification on the first thing, the activity report. So you talked about the public copiers, and we're on track to upgrade the management system. So at this point, if somebody wants to make a copy, they can't do it in the library because they've changed the technology and we didn't get ours yet. Is that right? Or
so you can make copies in there. What it is that the city added new copiers. And so with the new copiers, we could have either kept the old copiers and then kept that service contract and paid for that ongoing service contract. Or as we still already had the new ones coming in. So it was actually offloading the old ones so we could remove them and not pay for that service contract continuing. But the new ones come in and it's very, very low price. The cost per copy that they charge us for the new copiers is much lower. So what we did is we just put an honesty box right now because it doesn't work with the old coin towers. The old coin towers, the printer interface on it does not work with the new copy system. So what we're looking at is, I will say is earlier today, I just put in a request for our ISD department to go forward with just making sure they don't have any concerns with the vendor that we're looking forward with, but it might be 8 to 12 weeks, depending on how soon they can get the kiosks and everything in. But these kiosks, the new ones would have new coin towers, and then they would have new payment systems. So it'd be cash, change, and credit card, tap to pay, those kind of things.
and so they have a print management system. Right now, you don't have a print management system at all, or?
Right now, we're still using the same system we had before.
Okay.
So right now, we're still using what's called Spot and Cassie. So like if you came into the library, you have to log in to the system called Spot that allows you to connect to the Wi-Fi, and then that code allows you to release your print jobs. The thought going forward is that you'll just have a landing page that says accept the terms. And then if you want to print something, either you email it or you upload the document. So it'll be a different system and more compatible. That system that we have, that the Wi-Fi management, the PC management, the print management system is a much older system. So the newer system should be more streamlined and easier to use for all of us, for the public and the staff.
Sounds great. And I just have one more little question.
Marcia, if you're going to ask about something else, can I?
Yeah.
You've been referring to them as a coin tower, but
Mhm.
can't people use their Visa card to pay for copies?
Not yet. They have not been able to. So right now we use the brand is a Jamex.
So they have to have coins.
You have to have coins or cash right now. So we do coins or
The
cash.
Coins are cash. They have to have.
They just can't do credit cards. So the thought is that we would have a system that would add credit card payment. And one of the things we had to look at is that every time you get a charge of a credit card, it charges you either a minimum fee or it charges you a percentage of a fee. So the different vendors we were looking at, how much does each one charge for print and everything? And so I think we may have to come back to the board later to relook at copy costs or print costs
Right.
if we're starting to get more charges based on credit card fees.
Because it would be a cost to us, not the cardholder?
Correct. Like I forget the exact law. There's a California law regarding, putting fees to
Yeah.
card holders on there. The city recently put in a policy for that because of places like in planning department where you're putting in large fees or building permits and those kind of things where you have fees and a percentage would be paid off of there. And we actually asked for the library to be exempt off of that fee because the majority of our fees are actually for library fines. If they're for fines or replacement items or something like that. And we're just charging the person for the fines rather than saying, okay, you're paying $1, we're going to charge you $1.20 for credit card. So we just set $1. And yeah, so
What is the charge per page for did we decide we're going to call them patrons? Last time we took a poll of what do we call these people that use the library?
we haven't decided yet. We're still,
Good, because
but yeah.
I don't like patron, but at any rate, because that implies they're buying something to me and they don't all. It's a free library. But another issue.
10 cents a page.
What is the cost per page for a member of the community coming in and using the copy machine?
Copy machine right now is 10 cents a page
Okay.
for black and white. And it's what, 50%, 25%? I was like 25 cents for color, 25 cents for color.
Uh-huh.
But the new system also, because right now, when you're at a staff station, you can only, or I should say staff station, when you're at a public station, you can only print to black and white. You can copy to black and white and color. The new system will allow us to basically, if you're at a station, to print to black and white or color. So we will actually have more of that as well.
But if it was, okay, so the user gives us a dime, let's say, for a black and white copy. How much of that dime did we have to spend for ink and paper? Not to mention staff time, restocking the above, but that's harder to define than paper costs and ink costs.
I don't remember the paper cost right now. I thought that they were charging something like 0.07 cents per print or something. It's pretty low.
Less than a penny a page.
Less than a penny a page that they're charging us for the copies because the new contract just came in and the city ISD department is the one managing that contract, but it's much lower, I know, per copy.
I was just curious how profitable it is to the library and the city for us to be in the copy business. And if we're making roughly 8 cents a page out of a dime, we're making maybe 8 cents.
Maybe I think one of the things we're not making a lot, but it's more of a service kind of a
Oh,
thing.
sure, yeah.
But the
No,
one,
I was just out of curiosity.
Yes.
Because
I think the one issue I was concerned about both the credit card payment is some of the credit cards some of the vendors will charge you a minimum fee. So they might charge you per transaction 25
Can you
cents.
really use a credit card for a 10-cent purchase?
Some people have.
Yes.
Oh, some people do.
Yeah, people come in asking for 1, 2, or 3 pages and then have either a $20 bill or they have a credit card.
I was gonna say, I mean, a lot of people don't carry currency anymore
Right.
or as much.
So,
Yeah, the COVID changed that.
so one of the vendors we're looking at just basically charges you a percentage no matter how much, rather than a flat charge plus it. They just charge a percentage off of that. So that would be, so that's what I mean. We'll have to come back at a later time just to look at like how the fees are going as everything is implemented going forward.
Looks like that no matter way we slice the pie, it's gonna be no big deal.
Right. It's not a huge
It's a
lot.
small amount of money, no matter what we look at.
Right, and it's a great convenience, I think.
Exactly. I see these as a public service more than anything else. So, and cost what, 25 cents at UPS. So it's really, a dime is not a big deal.
Yeah.
So, my last question was, on the Museum of Cultural Arts part, we talked about the Alta California map in the Few Memorial Garden. Where is that?
So that's the area where your gardening
Right
club,
here.
right out here, the
Yeah.
one right
Here.
outside,
Right there.
where the gardening club goes out
Where
there.
I saw you that.
Yeah, and there was a map of ceramic map of Alta California.
Yeah.
It was from 1935 when the Few Memorial Garden, when this was all built and developed, they built a garden in there and they built a map of Alta California, and it started to fall off. We put it on the Museums Commission agenda to say, what should we do with it? And we'd done research based, the past 25 years, there'd been research on what should we do with this? And so I put it forward. And at 2 p.m., I got a call that the city manager's office heard a crash and that the ceramic tile had fallen off.
Oh, no.
So myself and the artifact specialist went out, we just grabbed some archival boxes and boxed everything up. We just found a scan, which Andres is here, and we're having one of our volunteers, hopefully we'll be able to scan it, because the thought is that we want to do a historically accurate ceramic tile, so replica of that, to put it into that space, because it's just, it shows you what the map would have looked like in, late 1700s, early 1800s of Alta California.
Okay, I thought it was that one. I just
Yeah.
wanted to check. Okay, thank you. That's-
Any questions about the other issues?
Actually, I do.
You do? Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
That's
I was wondering if you could kind of walk us through the finance part of it. I'm just trying to understand, the revenue and the expenses and what they are. As long as, if we have a few minutes, if that's
Sure.
okay.
So going into, you're talking on the,
Pages.
Not on the activity
10
report.
and 9 and 10.
sure.
Um,
Yeah, so on which part, so generally, what I could say on this one is, we have the general fund, right, which is the Fund 101, whenever we're going through, that's what's the city's providing. So the city's providing off of there on the general fund. We've moved this past fiscal year from having multiple kind of different units under there to putting into either library administration or reference services. So that includes, like, we'll moving in, when you're looking at expenditures, all of the collections going to be under a specific item code, account code in there, and reference services. All of our supplies are going to be under there, all of our printing costs. So we separate everything out based on this, all of our staffing costs go in there. So things like in 101 reference services, a large part of that amended budget or year-to-date actual budget is staffing costs. Those are folks that are inside of, like, Kim and David's team. Those are those folks on there. Library administration, that's myself, that's Francesca, a couple on-call folks there. So that's where those ones are in the 5510. Same thing when you start looking at the Fund 810, that is our library trust fund. The library trust fund is the fund here for the Board of Library Trustees. When we go make funds for grants, when we get private donations, money coming from the Monterey Public Library Friends and Foundation, that's going to come through the library trust fund, that Fund 810. But at the same time, we have all the same codes for 5510 and 5530, depending on if it's public services, depending on if it's the back of the house, IT costs, all of these things. So things like internal costs are also in here. This is just a very kind of narrow kind of overview of it, just kind of, it's not really, opened out in terms of all of the different specific codes. This is also, as you'll notice here, this is as of April 30th, 2024. So this expenditure, when you're looking at the expenditure, this is also fiscal year. So we are looking right there from July through April, meaning we still have May and June. So 2 months left.
So just to follow up on that. Yeah, I was a little confused because a lot of the codes disappeared. But so you're spending trust fund money on the library administration is Tula or whatever, some expenses are covered by the trust fund that are not covered by the city.
Right, and I could always give you a breakdown on a lot of that. So for example, the trust fund is, what I would say on some of those for expenditures, they're for the personnel. There's one person, which is the fund development officer, who is funded off of that. It'd be the 810-5510. Right now, we don't have anybody else that's funded on trust fund hours for staffing. But when we have grants or different things coming in through the state, I like to keep them in the trust fund revenue and trust fund expenditure, so they're actively tracked, so it doesn't look like we're increasing expenditures or increasing revenue from the general fund. Those ones should really be separate.
That makes sense.
So things like zip books would be covered under here, or when we do, when we do purchases from the wish list from the Friends and Foundation, those things are put in here. And we also have collection budget. That's also put inside of here. So all of those things that are on kind of the ask would fall under the 810.
So, but 5530, is that the books that, additional materials that you buy with foundation money?
That's, yeah, so 5530 would be a number of things, but that would be 5530, and then it goes into 4254, which is our actual collection number. And I can always give you guys the actual numbers from the collection that we use there. But for example, we will have if we ask for specific funding from either a grant or the Friends and Foundation towards materials, or if they have a ZIC books, those are going to come in through 810. Those are going to come in through that trust fund. But this is just a number of adopted budget, amended budget, year-to-date actual, and a lot of these things they adjust based on grants as well. So the 810 is a little harder to judge rather than the general fund, because if we get another grant that comes in there as expenditure or revenue, it's going to increase or how we're spending that.
So your figure adopted budget is your estimate of what they're going to bring in that you intend to spend this year. Is that?
For the 810 or for the general fund?
Well, yeah, for the 810 for the trust fund, yeah.
Yeah, that's just really just an estimate, and it's pretty much just like a 3 to 5 year estimate of, we expect, $100,000 here, or, we expect things to be around the same, because then if they go, we don't want a huge variation on expenditures, but things like summer reading programs, events, performers, games, prizes, a lot of that comes also through that 810, that trust fund.
Right, so you have adopted budget 203, amended budget 326. So more came in than you expected, or you're spending more than you expected. I'm just,
Let me, I'll see on this. So, yeah, so like revenue, if we're looking at page 10 on the
I was looking
revenue.
at expenditures. We were
Expenditures?
talking
Okay.
about expenditures, but.
So I think some of these numbers, yeah, so the expenditures, as you'll see in there, the library administration percent spent, 53%, and reference services 44%. So we're spending less in the trust fund than we are in the general fund. I find from the staff, I asked them to spend from the general fund first, to put it, because that's money that if you don't use it by the end of the fiscal year, it goes back into the general funds.
And the trust fund can be rolled over.
Yeah, exactly. So the trust fund rolls over except for certain grants, because there are grants when there are deadlines at the end of fiscal years or calendar years, depending on the grant. And if you don't spend the money, you may lose it or have to return it.
Maybe it's a consequence of something the board requested, I don't know how many months or years ago. We used to get these figures in much more detail. And it was just, I look at it and I go cross-eyed. So, this larger grouping of the dollars is much more helpful to me anyway. But still, somebody might look at expenditures, Fund 101, 5510, administration, over $1 million. And then you go over and you say, balance, Fund 101, 5510, administration, is that 15 million or 15,000? That's 15,000, isn't it? Or is it 15 million there under adopted budget?
So you're now looking at revenue, not expenditures, is that right?
I went from expenditures over to revenue, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, right.
And this is the past, I should say the current fiscal year. So this is adopted budget. So some of these things would be like going in the general fund. This is where certain, I believe, like fines and fees, some of those things are going into that.
No, just tell me, is that number there, 101, 5510, is that 15 million or 15,100?
15,000.
That's what I thought. So how could we spend $1 million and only get 15,000?
Because we're not reliant on the revenue on this. This is coming from the public. So
In
the,
addition to the regular budget.
yeah,
Does not include what we get from the city.
Right.
yes,
Okay,
so this is
so
just,
that's not including what the city is going to allocate upcoming soon for the next year.
Right. So think of like what,
All right.
what you would look at for an example of like a recreation department is a revenue, their revenue chart is going to be much higher, but that's because their revenue is just going to be on
Okay.
fees and programs and services.
So that just like the 8 cents a copy we get from the copier machine and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Fines and-
that's
okay,
why it's.
fine. Thank you. All right, that's all.
Mhm.
You don't have to go any farther. I
But
Jay,
believe I have it now.
wait, oh, I'm sorry. I just, on the library administration, on the revenue trust fund side, this is what has been raised as donations and grants and things like that, right?
That's correct.
That
Yeah.
it is 113 this year.
It's what we budgeted, but then the year to date, the YTD actual is 184, 587.
Right, so we actually brought in more than you expected. You thought you were gonna bring in as revenue more than that. And
Mhm.
this is against the expenditure. So if you had to estimate how healthy the trust fund is at this point.
I
I mean,
gotta-
are we spending more than we're raising, or are we, it's hard to tell.
No, we are raising
More than we're spending.
more than we're spending. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. So we're seeing a, and it would take me a moment to pull that, all of that information, but I would just say that,
Yeah, at some
Yeah.
point, maybe.
It would
we should
say,
look at the Health of the trust. fund.
overall, I'll just give you just kind of a, ending, let's see, date credits. We were about, if I'm looking at this number correct, 110 in the positive, $110,000 in the positive in the trust fund.
I think a lot of people realize that without that little bit of excess there, we'd be up Fertilizer Creek because otherwise we wouldn't be getting enough from the general budget to cover everything. And thank goodness for that amount there.
Mhm.
And Brian, this does not include the 140,000 that were raised at MC Gives that we're going to talk about later on the agenda, or does it?
70, the agenda item is, have those items landed? Those items are noted
Yeah.
on here? Yeah,
Could be.
Oh,
yeah, okay, yeah.
any other questions? I have one. We have an endowment fund.
mhm.
Is there information available anywhere on that? And it doesn't need to be part of this, but
Yeah,
where can I get that information?
that would be through Community Foundation, Monterey County, CFMC, I believe the negative report, I'd have to pull that
But
information.
you have access to it, correct?
Yes, yeah,
So if I asked you, you'd be able to share it.
right, I'd be able to research and get that
Excellent.
information, yeah.
Yeah, at some point, maybe in the future.
Yeah, because that's, we had to drain from it during the COVID time, and I don't know how well it has recovered from that.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it and begin the discussion of the motion with one last question. It says, talking about the fiscal year 25 budget coming up on the June 4th City Council agenda. Changes to the library budget will support opening additional hours and increase the collection budget. Does that mean if we don't get everything we have said we need in the budget that's approved on the 4th of June, number one, we won't be able to hire all the new people that are on that little four-line list there. And number two, in the absence of that, we won't be able to open the extra hours.
Right, without staffing, we won't be able to open the doors.
And without the budget being approved on the 4th of June by the city council, we won't have the money to hire the staffing. So,
Well,
it's
I
like a
don't-
domino effect.
Right, I don't know how that goes into effect, like if they would just push it to the next 2 weeks to just what the timeline needs to be for the council. I don't know that part, like how far, and they need to get all of their approvals. But generally, their council could either look at, is there a special session or are they pushing an item for another 2 weeks later? I don't know on that side. That's probably more of the city clerk would know that part about it. And they may even bring that up during the budget hearing about when they need to have it in place before they can actually start everything July 1.
So you mean like hiring and everything, but the simple and most hoped for solution would be for the council just to approve whatever amount we have submitted we need and itemize it for the staff. And then because we got the staff, we can afford the hours.
But I think we made it very clear to them that without the staff, we cannot open on Monday.
That was my point behind
Right.
everything I've just
It-
asked.
you know,
Yes.
If somebody says, well, we
It's a
can't give
domino,
you any
one
more
affects
staff, but use the ones you have, and okay, you can open on Monday. We gave Brian pretty clear
Right.
message.
Yeah.
We
That is
cannot
not
do
doable.
that.
Yeah,
We
that's,
don't
I
have-
just wanted to make 100% clear that without the council approving the money to hire the staff, we can't open the extra hours.
Right.
Or we could let patrons run the show.
All right. If there are no more questions,
I just want to make the observation, it looks like everything has increased, that the number of checkouts, the number of hours, the number of programs, the number of everything. I mean, it seems like we're on an upward trajectory, which is a good thing.
yeah,
And I would suspect that if we had more funding and more staff and more hours per week, the
more.
angle on that graph of increasing programs and attendance and everything would be even more steeply up toward the upper right corner of the graph.
We'll see.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
Yep.
Okay, and then the agenda we have. Ah. We have general public comments. Are there any audiences? Public appearance? No public.
Well, Andres,
Next is item 6, presentation on Cannery Row Days and local history. It's Andres. You have the floor.
Thank you. Gonna share this here. Oops. Are we good? Okay. All right. I think we're good. Oh, wait, one more thing. I think we're good now. All right, thank you. Thanks for having me. So I am Andres Garza. I'm the local history librarian at Monterey Public Library. I think I've met most of you, but maybe not all. So it's nice to meet those of you I haven't. I'm going to give a wrap up of Cannery Row Days this year. So really quickly, we have, I'm going to talk a little bit about what Cannery Row Days is. That was the question I had when I first started here. So I'll try to answer that. And then 2024 Cannery Row Days, I'll talk a little bit about what we did different this year. I'll go over some highlights and then talk about the outcomes and impact. And then I'll open it up for questions if you have any questions. So Cannery Row Days is Monterey Public Library's annual celebration of author John Steinbeck and his connection to Monterey's people, places, and history. This year, Cannery Row Days focused on Tortilla Flat. The aim of this year's Cannery Row Days was to go beyond the pages of Tortilla Flat and present programs that highlight the real people, places, and stories behind Steinbeck's 1935 novel. And to do that, we had a couple of talks. We had a couple of in-person talks. One was by Dennis Copeland on Susan Gregory. Susan Gregory was the Monterey school teacher who Steinbeck dedicated Tortilla Flat to. And the other in-person talk was by local writer Joe Livernoy, who gave a talk on Eddie Romero, who's the real life person who the character Pilon was based on in Cannery in Tortilla Flat. And then we had 2 Zoom programs. These programs were just were made available on Zoom, and they're remote programs. And the first was a talk by Susan Schillinglaw, and she talked about Steinbeck and his relationship to Mexico. A lot of people sort of look at Tortilla Flat as his book on Mexican and California and Native American paisanos, but Steinbeck did a lot of other work related to Mexico, and so she talked about that. And then Tim Thomas gave a talk on the canneries and the multicultural work environment there, and so those 2 happened on Zoom, and so those are recorded, also now available on YouTube. Then we had some other in-person programs. We had a walking tour with Tim Thomas, where it was sort of a play on a walking tour that he typically gives at Fisherman's Wharf, but it was a bit different because he focused a bit on the paisanos and the history of the paisanos and working in canneries and living in that area. So that was on April 21st. And then we had a reading group with Susan Schillinglaw, which was pretty well attended. I think it had higher attendance than last year's reading group that we had for Cannery Row Days. We had an Alone basket weaving demonstration with Linda Yamani and Violet Smith. And then we had a program that I started a few months ago called From the Archives, where we take a collection from the archive and we highlight it and we tell the stories behind that collection. And this time we focused on the Sal Coletto collection. He was a ship captain. He fished for sardine and tuna. And he wrote a manuscript called The Sardine Fisherman. And in that manuscript, he talks a bit about, he has stories of his interactions and time with John Steinbeck. And he talks a bit about his relationship to Eddie Romero, who's the real life Pilon. And so there's a lot of tie-in with Tortilla Flat just in that one manuscript inside the Sal Coletto collection. And then the final program we had was a Tortilla Flat film screening, the 1942 film, which is a Victor Fleming film. It's more like a comedy. It's not so dark as Tortilla Flat. And that was pretty well attended. I gave a little brief talk before the movie, and then afterwards I thought everyone was going to leave, and then everyone stayed, and we had a Q&A for a while, and that was really fun, and people had a lot of questions about the movie, and yeah, so it went pretty well. This was just our flyer that we had, and this is just some highlights. We've got the Alone basket weaving demonstration, which was well attended. That was at Colton Hall, and it was a really beautiful day, so I took a photo outside of Colton Hall that day just because it was so nice. And this was another highlight, like I mentioned, the Joe Livernoy talk. He gave he talked about the real life Eddie Romero. He actually wrote an article called The Long, Slow Death of Eddie Romero, which is on his website. I think it's called Monterey Friends and Neighbors. It's a really great site for local stories. And after or during that talk, he also had a new project he was working on, which is talking about this story of Rich Lovejoy. Rich Lovejoy was a friend of John Steinbeck and Carol, his wife. And when John Steinbeck won the Pulitzer Prize, he received a check for $1,000, and he gave that check to Rich Lovejoy, and he said, "I'd like you to write this novel." And he let him stay in his place here for a whole year. And the result of that was Takuin, this book you see here. It did not get published. I don't think anyone liked it. And many, many years later, Rich Lovejoy's son, he self-published this Taku Wind, and I think he published less than 50 copies of it. And at the presentation, Joe Livernoy gifted us one of the copies, his copy, to Brian and I, and so that'll be in the history room now for part of our collection. This was from the archives that Dennis and I put together. That's Sal Coletto on the right. That's him telling stories, and that's him in the center too. That's aboard the U.S. Liberator. He's actually on the far right in that little cap. And then that's his other ship, the Dante Alighieri. So these are just photos that we shared. We shared a lot more photos in the presentation, but just wanted to give you a glimpse of Sal. This was Tortilla Flat film screening that we had. Just some photos from the film. That was kind of fun. These are our numbers. We had 10 programs this year. We had 2 on Zoom, 8 in person, 2 offsite. We had a total of 322 attendees. 2 YouTube videos resulted, and we had 6 committee members who were Brian, Rebecca Mostow from Western Flyer Foundation, Susan Schillinglaw, myself, Tim Thomas, and Gregor Callier. That was the team that helped organize Cannery Row Days. So I thought I'd try to sum up the impact, I think, of Cannery Row Days. And I think for me, I've sort of noticed that a lot of the programs tend to engage and build community. A lot of folks who are interested in Monterey history come to these events to talk and to meet each other and to share interest. There's a lot of learning going on too. I feel like we're always sort of promoting lifelong learning. People, when they come to these events, oftentimes they will return within a week to the history room, and they're there asking me questions about something that they kind of had an inspiration to research a little further. And a lot of times these programs do that. They tend to inspire people to look into things a little more. I think we're bringing awareness to the collections, part of the Cannery Row Days, or at least from the archives event. Really, I wanted to bring awareness to our collections. We've got a lot of great collections, and sometimes people don't know that they're there. And sometimes people don't know what's inside of them. And researchers do. They'll ask for a finding aid and they'll be able to locate that. But for the general public, this is a way to sort of encapsulate that collection and inspire more research into that collection. And I think that the other advantage is that we're using the collection. We're not just sort of sitting idly on it. I think that's important, letting that collection breathe and kind of bring a little life to it. And then the other thing this is one thing that I like as someone who's into metadata, it improves our metadata, because what happens is, like for the Sal Coletto program, Jeannie Coletto, who is a granddaughter, great-granddaughter, I believe, of Sal Coletto, she attended with her mother, who's in her 90s, and they identified, the grandmother was able to identify people in these photos that we hadn't identified. And in some cases, we misidentified. They were misidentified. So this is one of these things that we can bring the community together to improve the information that we have on these photos. And as people get older, that becomes harder and harder to do. And so that was great. And also Jeannie was very, very, very grateful. Her grandmother or her mother was very grateful, and they just felt really valued. So I just wanted to add that they just felt like, wow, this is amazing. You put this together. This is my grandfather up here. This is amazing. So I think made them feel valued. And I think the other part of that is just building partnerships in the community, working with Western Flyer Foundation and other folks each year. And so I noticed this year we worked with some different people than last year. So it's always nice to kind of build. That's all I have. And just any questions?
I just want to say, it looks like it was a wonderful program this year. It seems to be growing every year,
Yeah.
and very well received. Do you get a sense of how many how many people are local and how many, do you see people traveling from outside of the area to come? Just curious.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but I do hear people, I do speak to people who, during the reading group, there were two people who were here from New York, who were visiting family or friends here, and they just came to the reading group. They hadn't read Tortilla Flat, but that's okay. I think that was great. They got this master class in it with Susan Schillinglaw, and yeah, we sort of welcome that. I think it's great. We've had people come from, in this year, just from what I remember, is someone came from Santa Cruz, San Jose, that area, and then, yeah, just
And I
sort
would
of,
imagine on Zoom, you get a lot of people from all over.
oh, yeah, that's a really good point. On Zoom, we have people from all over, people who used to live in Monterey, who no longer live in Monterey. So it's one of those things that really, I think, people who have moved away appreciate. Yeah.
JD?
No,
Bob?
thank you, Andres.
Yeah, I mean, this is great. I have one question and one comment. On the poster that we have in our agenda packet, on Thursday, the 25th of April, there was a thing called Pause to Read. And usually when you see something in pause is spelled AWS, it implies there were canines there maybe, or cats at least. And
Yeah.
so, but I didn't see that on the list you put up. So I was wondering what was that?
That was sort of a smaller program because it's a program we normally have anyways, the Pause to Read. And so that week, I talked to Bianca, our children's librarian, and I asked, oh, could we do some tortilla flats related books for the kids?
On the regular basis, people read to their dogs and bring them to the library, or how does that work? I haven't brought
They're-
mine in yet because it's not well behaved.
Mine isn't either, but they're service dogs essentially, and they're
Oh,
they're
okay.
trained dogs, and they're dogs that you can read to. And usually we have two, and Bianca, that's her program. And so I asked Bianca if she would be okay if they read tortilla flat books that week, not tortilla flats, but so there was a book I think on tortillas and a book on like some sort of related things, but it's mostly children that.
So it was connecting to an ongoing program, but tying it into Cannery Road Days.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the beneficial outcomes and goals of programs like this, that they can then sort of send tentacles out and connect to other organizations and other programs that the library puts on. And so that it's not just an isolated thing. Oh, it's over and that's it, but it's, connected. And so now I see. The other thing I was going to ask you sort of personally, I don't know if you're familiar with the English actor Timothy Spall, Spall.
No.
And I'm looking online and I can't find in his filmography, but I'll send it to you. Maybe best movie I've ever seen. And that's over a bunch of years. And I can't think of the name of it, but it's about a large house out in the countryside in England. And there's a curator or director. And then Timothy is in charge of this fantastic collection of photographs. And he has his own filing system, and they're just all over. And you'd walk through, the camera walks through. It's not a documentary, it's fiction. But when you see the rooms, you think, oh, everything's a mess. But the way it works is somebody will come in, ask a question like maybe they would in the history room. And he will go and he will find a photograph, or they will have a photograph. And they'll say, who in the heck is this in this family picture, let's say. And he will find a picture that will lead to another picture, that will lead to another picture, maybe throughout the generations even, and come up with an answer of who it is. And it's just the most fantastic film. And I don't want to spoil the punchline and all of that, but I will try to send you the name of that film. And I'm not sure if we have it. I'd have to blame Kim if we don't, because it was probably one of those DVDs we got rid of because nobody borrowed it. But it's really a great one. And if, I can come up with the name and send it to you, and you ever see it listed on TV or something, hit the record button.
Okay.
Because I'm sure as an archivist and historian, you would really find it interesting. And just the whole process of going from one photo to another, and you might end up with a photo that's a generation younger or older than the one that was initially presented in this fictional character. And it's basically how they respond to, in quotes, progress and maintain the facility. So, but if you're not familiar with Timothy Spall, he's, well, I could look up how old he is, but I would say he's probably at least in his 70s now. So he's not making as many movies as he would have, let's say, 20 years ago. Okay,
Well,
great.
thank you. I am interested in that.
Yeah, it's a really a fantastically,
Yeah.
and I even think it's black and white,
Ah,
which gives it another sort of feel. Because certainly the photos that he has in this huge collection are black and white. So, okay,
Yeah.
good. I'll get that to you.
thanks.
I assume some of these were recorded and they're on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, a few of them were, I think another one was recorded by an outside organization. Well, the Coletto program was, but the person who recorded it might should get that to us at some point. So we may end up putting that up, or they may end up
Great.
putting it somewhere as well. But,
Thank you so
yeah.
much.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you know Terry Trotter of the Trotter Art Galleries?
Terry Trotter?
Oh,
Uh-huh.
no, I just have heard a lot
He's
of
got a
about him.
collection of Steinbeck stuff.
Yeah.
And I was at his museum one time and I happened to see he's got this gun permit that Steinbeck got because he felt threatened. His portrayal angered a lot of people. And so he got a gun permit. And apparently when he moved to New York, he got another one there just to be on the safe side. But Terry Trotter is right off Forest, I think, isn't it? He's a very personable person, very helpful, good-natured. So
They also have Steinbeck's typewriter and his desk, the Trotter Gallery. They have
okay,
also Steinbeck room.
it's a very nice
Yeah.
place.
in
I have
Pacific
to
Road,
make it there, yeah.
Forest Avenue.
Yeah, you're not the first who's mentioned Terry Trotter's
Oh, yeah.
collection. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I've heard it's great.
Can I add on there just that Rich Lovejoy, if people don't know.
Very
then-
friendly, very personal.
Yeah, Richie Lovejoy was a close friend of Ed Ricketts and John Steinbeck. And so like, if you look at one of the photos that's on that we have enlarged over there at the Ricketts Laboratory, that's actually Richie Lovejoy there. And he did the drawings for the Pacific Biological Laboratories book for their catalog. And he used to photograph for Ed Ricketts, and he also worked on Between Pacific Tides. He did the drawings for Between Pacific Tides. So those guys were all part of a small group. And, Andres and I were talking a bit, and the book actually is what it's like. There's no real characters. It's more like
I think
Sitka,
this,
Alaska is the
yeah.
character, right?
yeah, the location is the main character.
So
Has-
it was just like, there's a lot of ties with all of these guys, but knowing more and more as we get this, you start hearing how all of this intertwines. But it was a really interesting kind of series of programs. And thanks, Andres, for that, for your work.
Thanks.
There are no more questions. And let's see.
Andres, excuse me. The film that I was trying to remember, it's called Shooting the Past. 1999. And it was originally on BBC in England.
Mhm.
And you can find it on Wikipedia.
Okay,
But Shooting the Past is the film that I was referring to.
thank you.
Yeah. Now I can sleep. Jeez.
Save you an email.
Best film you ever saw. What is,
What?
the best film you ever saw, but
Oh, it is. I mean, it's just, it just grabs you.
Yeah.
I mean, and you feel for the characters, the protagonists in it. And it's just, if you ever find it and watch it, get in touch with me and we can
Chat about it.
share opinions. You
Yeah,
can tell me I'm full of fertilizer or something, but whatever.
see it here.
The next item is trustee comments. We'll start with Marcia.
Um, Just thanks to all the programs that you put on. I'm looking forward to trivia night when we all get to make idiots out of it. I see it's sold out, which is wonderful. I don't have anything today.
Jennifer?
Nothing other than Andres, thank you so much for the presentation. That was quite fascinating.
Thank you.
Bob?
Yeah, no, I'm just real pleased to see how, as you've given us some information about how the things, well, going back though, one of the things that was front and foremost and everything when we brought Brian on, which was almost 2 years ago now, wouldn't it be 2 years in August?
Yeah.
Was his saying, and we all sort of jumped for joy with the idea of making the library a central community kind of place for this area, and you know, connecting what you're doing and the tentacles of those programs, connecting with other library programs and maybe other libraries, maybe other organizations that are interested in some of the same and based on some of the same values as we are, you know, educating and communicating and all of that kind of stuff. Just it's real pleasing to see those things falling into place.
I agree with that. I like the direction that the library is taking. It's a big improvement. I'm very glad. Okay, now we come to staff comments.
All right. Well, thanks the staff. Thanks, Kim, Andres, Francesca, you guys for being here. Appreciate everything going on. We have our summer reading program starting June 1st. Looking forward to all of that. Summer game board coming soon as well. And yeah, and if just a reminder, if folks want to comment or make any suggestions regarding the budget, do so during the city council agenda. If there's any questions or anything come in there, you know, there will be time for public comment for anything at that council meeting. So just keeping that in mind that should be scheduled sometime soon. You should hear something from the city really soon. But other than that, we also have some children's shelving going to be coming in the next 2 weeks. You will start seeing some changes out there from the shelves will be upgraded. And so we're excited to see some of those things happen and continue to work one step at a time of improving as we can. And thanks to all of the staff we have here for all of their hard work and, you know, moving forward and working together on everything. So I appreciate them.
Any other?
I have
questions,
just a
John?
quick question. There was only one item in the read packet that Francesca sent us, and it was a letter from a very pleased user of the library. And she was talking about how wonderful the, was it a sewing or a knitting class? Sewing class was, and she said it was led by a instructor named Julia, but she couldn't recall the last name. Could that be Julia who volunteers for the
No.
library, putting books back on the shelves?
No,
Oh.
it's actually Julia is one of our, she actually is the fund development assistant, but also works at the desk as well. So works at the help desk. And so she has a background of, if you've been to Chocolate and Wine, Lucia and Julia, who are both work at the library now, have done different knitting and sewing things, and they donate that annually to Chocolate
Sure.
and Wine.
Oh, a staff member, not a volunteer.
Staff
Okay.
members. But yeah, so we have her, she does some of her time, because she's an on-call hourly. She does some of her time doing the fund development, writing donor letters and that. And then other times she's working on the help desk and providing services or doing programs. So she does both.
Because I know the person who wrote that letter and thanked the library for the program and complimented it and everything. And she is just a very strong supporter of this place and has been for a long time. So it was nice to see that she's still in the swing of things and participating in all of that kind of stuff. So thank you.
Yeah.
And thank Julia.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else, anybody? The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Jeez.